Susie D.
Yeah, it'd be closer than that.
Get a little closer.
Yeah. We'll just arrange it. Pretty flowers, huh?
Oh yeah. This one's getting pretty old, but this one is. These are all right.
Okay.
Is it running now?
Yeah.
Well, this all started back in a little town of Castiglione in Italy. And my mother was born in, yeah. My mother was born in 1872, and my dad was born in 1863. Dad was 9 years older than Mama. Dad was an orphan, and he was the head of the family at the age of 13. And he brought his mother and his brother Vincenzo and his sisters Anna and Lucy to New York. And when they went through Ellis Island, Papa told him his name was Sabatino, and the guy that was writing down the name said, "Oh well, you're over here, your name is Sam." And Uncle Jim said his name was Vincenzo, and they said, "Well, your name is James." Actually, James in Italian is Giacomo. Well, they went through New York, and they finally wound up in Oklahoma. At Krebs, Oklahoma, Dad went into the coal mines. And at the same time that Dad would come over, why, Grandpa Joe Massaro, Giuseppe Massaro, brought his family over. And he brought his second wife, darn, his second wife, Euphrazina, and two daughters, Domenica and Martha. And after they got to the States, where the third daughter, Oro, was born. That's on my mother's side. So Dad wound up at Como, Colorado in a coal mine, and when he was there, the mining company had given up an old tunnel, and it was all caved in, and they wanted that tunnel cleared up because they were going to reuse it again. And Dad took a contract to clear up that tunnel and re-timber it for so much a yard. And Dad got into there and he found 1,500 feet of the tunnel that didn't need any work at all. The company didn't want to pay him for that.
Yeah.
And he threatened to take him to court because he had an ironclad contract, and they finally had to pay him for it. And the result was that Dad got enough money to go into mining for himself.
Wow.
So they went to Louisville, and Dad started a coal mine there, the Garibaldi No. 1. It was the old Louisville Coal and Land Company. They worked that mine out, and then they put in the Garibaldi No. 2, and Dad, when they worked it out, Dad decided, now this was in Louisville, Colorado. And while they were in Louisville, in 1906, on the 18th of June, in a little 4-room house up in northeastern Louis, the northeastern end of Louisville, Colorado, an area called Little Italy, my brother George and I were born. And then Dad got tired of coal mining, so he went to Welby, Colorado, and he started truck gardening. And he was making good money in truck gardening, and he was lending money to people back in Italy for them to come over here, and they went into truck gardening alongside of him.
Did he have a mine and a trucking company at the same time?
No, he was all through with the mines.
Okay.
At that time, he was through with mining, and he went into gardening, and then he finished gardening, and he decided to go into coal mining again, and went out to Firestone, Colorado, and sunk the Firestone mine. Firestone is coal. He sunk the Firestone, and they worked that out, and let's see, I was about 8 years old. Oh, Then he went to Frederick, Colorado from there and took over the Evans mine, and they operated that. And he had his two older boys, Louis and John, Louis Berardino and John Anthony, were helping at the mine. They were working in the mine too, and he made Louis pit boss and Johnny top boss. And when they got through there, he went back to gardening again. Then he got through gardening and he went up to Rock County, Colorado, and opened up the Wolf Creek mine. And that's about Mount Harris, was about 22 miles west of Steamboat Springs. And he worked that mine out, and then the company owed him a lot of money. They hadn't paid him for a long time. And they gave him an old worn-out mine in Louisville, Colorado called the Matchless. And Dad changed the name of that to the Paramount. And we worked it out, and then he went back to gardening after we came from Rock County to Louisville in 1925. In 1929, he had finished that mine, and he went down to Denver and bought the land that Uncle Jim had been on, the garden land, and he would work that land. And let's see, we've been in Rock County already, haven't we?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're there, and the house burned down, and Mama lost 2 babies in that house. And she lost a lot of babies. Out of 14 children, she lost 6. And Papa and Mama raised 4 boys and 4 girls. When I was born, my oldest brother Louis and my sister Rose and John were living with the folks. And George and I made 5. And then after we were born, Vi was born in 1908. Emma was born in 1910, and Julia was born in 1913. You see, Mama was 39 years old 43 years old when Julia was born. That was my baby sister. Well, then to what I started, when they left Louisville to go to the gardening, I was 2 years old. Then when I was 6 years old, they moved to Firestone, started that mine, and I started school. And the teacher at school, now mind you, I was 6 years old in the 1st grade, and the teacher got up in front of the class and said, "We have a lot of Italians here, and they eat a lot of macaroni because it's cheap, because the macaroni is made out of wheat straw." And boy, that 6-year-old kid come up on his feet in a hurry and told her that macaroni was made only from the best winter wheat.
That was you?
That was me. I told her, I was only 6 years old, and I told her all.
When did Grandpa change our name from D. Domenico to Domenico?
Oh, the
Was
minute
that done
we,
in New York?
yeah, well, the minute they got to America, they said, we'll give up that D. Domenico. And I remember that Rossi kid telling me later on, he said, "Boy, if we had a D in front of our name, I'd never give it up."
Yeah. Was it spelled D-I or D-E?
Small D-I.
Small D-I.
D. Domenico, and the capital D, Domenico.
Doesn't Domenico mean Sunday?
Oh, yeah. And then when my sister Rose was born, she was born on a Sunday. And Mama, Donata, means gift in Italian. And Domenica means Sunday, but the masculine form of Domenica is Domenico. So your name means Sunday. Means Sunday, okay. So when Rose was born, Mama got real smart, and she named Rose Rosa Donata Maria Di Domenico. That means a rose given to Mary on Sunday, because she was born on a Sunday. I thought that was pretty cute. 3 of the girls, Julia means lily, and Viola means violet, and Rosa, of course, is a rose. So 3 of the girls were named for flowers, and Emma, I don't know where she got the name Emma. Emma Madeline, your Aunt Emma Madeline. But anyway, so in 1929, the mine in Louisville was worked out, and I went to Alaska. I got a job with the Kennecott Copper Corporation in Kennecott, Alaska, and they called me a mine auditor. I was actually just a mine clerk. I kept payrolls. I ran a branch store and a branch post office and a movie. I
What?
ran movies twice a week.
What year was that?
That was from 1929 to 1932, 4 years, and 1929 and 32 inclusive.
Mm.
So I got made darn good pay, and the board wasn't too steep, and I saved a lot of money. And by 1931, I had $14,000 in the bank.
How much did you make in the mine?
I don't know what, I don't remember what they paid me, but I know I had that $14,000 in 3 years, so they must have paid me pretty good.
What was the cost of living up there? Didn't you say eggs were $1?
Well, that was after you got off in the interior where all the supplies came in by dog sled.
Yeah.
Everything was $1. A package of cigarettes, even a package of gum
Wow.
was $1. A potato, regardless of size, was $1. The little potato and the big potato each were $1. Eggs were $1 a piece. Flour and sugar were $1 a pound. But they were brought in hundreds of miles on a dog sled.
Yeah.
They cost. But in the towns, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
Where, especially on the coastal towns where the ships could bring the stuff in. And while I was there, the transportation was just changing from dog sleds to bush pilots, to airplanes. And when they started bringing it in by airplane, it was quite a bit cheaper.
Yeah. Understandable.
So, well, I had this money, and I had set up a ham radio station, and I was keeping a New York Stock Exchange quotation board for the miners. I was putting down they played the market pretty strong, the miners up there. People were working back in the States for 25 cents an hour, and they were paying $1.50 an hour for pick and shovel men in Alaska. So they were paying 6 times as much up there.
Yeah.
So I was drawing 6 times as much as I would in the States too. I was drawing darn good money.
Was it dangerous work? Is that why they paid so good, or was it just because there was no workers?
Just because they were in Alaska. Boy, I had some experiences up there. When I gave them their paycheck, I made them sign the payroll that they'd receive that check. And a lot of the men, they would start to write their name and then cover it up with their hand and ask me for an eraser. They were putting down an alias. What they were, we had a lot of skips, guys that were supposed to be paying alimony or child support.
Yeah.
Well, they just left the States and came up, because Alaska was a territory when I was up there.
Yeah.
And
It wasn't a state?
no, it wasn't a state,
Oh, I
it was
didn't
a
know
territory then. A territory. Well, and then when I was in Hawaii, the territory of Hawaii. And I was in Alaska when it was a territory. Both. Well, I had this $14,000, and at that time, you could buy stock on margin. You only had to put up 10% of the price. So I figured, well, I'll buy the stock, and if it goes up 1/10, I've doubled my money. See?
Yeah.
And if it goes up 50%, boy, I'm going to be 5 times my money. The price of the stock.
Yeah.
But I only had that, and I was looking at the stocks, and I was sitting trying to figure it out, and I said, oh boy, aviation is just starting up. That'll be the stock to buy. I bought aviation, and I didn't own it very long till it started going down and down. And New York kept sending telegrams. They needed more money to cover my stock. I borrowed $2,000 from Mama and put that in to brace up that stock, and finally I gave it up. I lost her money and my money. Boy, I come out of Alaska broke. Yeah. And up there, I had a camera, and I did my own developing and printing on pictures. I even printed pictures for some of the other men that were there. I ran that movie theater twice a week. I had an old Keystone projector, and the Geneva action, the action that jerked this film ahead, a frame at a time, between it jerks the film ahead while the picture is cut off. That vein goes by, and the fan, every time a vein went by, it jumped 1 frame. Well, that Geneva action went out of, quit working. So I gave him back I gave him back tickets. I told him we'd run the show again. And I took the Geneva action apart and repaired it and put it back in the machine. And when the master mechanic down there at the mills, see, I was up at the Jumbo Mine, that's 4 miles up above the mill. When he heard about it, he said, you don't touch those Genevas. We send them to Seattle to have them repaired. I didn't know that, so I went ahead and repaired it. But anyway, whenever you see pictures of polar bears, the pictures are in the movies, they're snow white.
Yeah.
Well, the only pair of polar bears I saw were pretty yellowish.
Yeah.
They were not snow white. Of course, that was in the summertime that I saw them. And I saw winter ptarmigan up there. They're dead white except for their eye and their beak. Oh, and the holes in the glacier. And we had one hole in the glacier that was full of water. At our power plant, we had 3 great big diesels, 7-cylinder diesels, and each cylinder was 48 inches by 60 inches. A 4-foot piston.
It's big.
And the stroke was 5 foot. And we started with compressed air. And those things ran so slow that the bearing on the crankshaft, what do you call the rod that runs from the piston to the crankshaft? That rod, where that rod hooked on the crankshaft.
The piston rod.
The piston rod, where it hooked on the crankshaft, it had an oil cup on it that you filled with an oil can. And those things ran so slow that you could catch that cup coming up and give it a squirt of oil and wait for it to come around again and give it another squirt of oil. That's how slow they ran.
How often did you oil it?
Once a day, you filled it with oil cups on that thing. And every time one of those things fired, the whole ground, the whole camp shook. Boy. And those holes, then we had a Pelton water wheel down there. We only ran it in the spring when the pothole that was full of water up on the glacier, the Kennecott Glacier was up above us. And when that pothole broke loose, the water finally melted through and it started coming down there. Well, they grabbed that water and put it into this Pelton, and we could shut down one of the. See, we only ran 2 of those diesels at a time. The third one was shut down.
Yeah.
But when that Pelton was running, we only ran 1 diesel. That Pelton replaced 1 diesel. And up at the Jumbo Mine, we had 2-story buildings, and they were built on Jumbo Glacier. And of course, the glacier was traveling. So what we did, we laid down a foundation of logs, and we put pipe rollers on it, and we put down the foundation of the building on top of these pipe rollers and built the building. And then we anchored the building up to the cliff with a cable, a steel cable. And the glacier, the building stood right there, but the glacier traveled under. And that glacier made about 40 inches a year. It traveled pretty good.
So how many logs did you have to take out and put up?
Well, we only had to replace 1 roller every year. The roller that come out the bottom, we take it back and put it under the top. Or no, the other. How the hell did we do that? Sure, that's the way we did it.
Yeah, that's how you do it.
The roller dropped off at the bottom, and then okay, so there was a great big snowfield up above there, and the ground slope from the cliff up there sloped down to our camp. And there was a great big snowfield up there. So at the end of the camp that faced that snowfield, we built a V-shaped log structure and filled it with rock, great big rock structure that in case that avalanche ever came down, this thing would split that snow around the bunkhouse, see? Mm-hmm. Only when it did break loose, I was standing up in my room, and my windows faced that slide, and the avalanche came down, and it spread it around that V-shaped thing, and at the back end of it, it came back together. It just came back together, and it hit our building, and it busted the window, and a piece of the glass hit me in the wrist here, that scar right there. And I didn't go down and have it stitched. I just put adhesive tape over it, strips of tape, and I got a pretty good scar there. And when that came down, it flowed like water. And after it passed me up against the wall, they had to use a pick.
Did it fill the room full of ice?
About half full.
And you were stuck against the wall?
That had me I turned around when I heard it hit the window. I turned and faced the window, and I saw it come through the window, and I didn't have time to run, so I jumped straight up. And that's what I was buried up to my chest.
Wow.
And that I like to froze to death before they got me out of there too. But they finally picked me loose, and then the nurses came up from the hospital. They came up there and rubbed me down with alcohol or something, anyway, to bring me out of it.
Did you do some gold mining up there?
No. Now all that and the ore that we were mining, we mined copper ore that ran as high as 86% copper. And also in these mines, we had 3 mines. We had Erie, Jumbo, and Bonanza, and they were all connected underground.
And that was Kennecott Copper?
That was owned by the Guggenheims. The Guggenheims owned that mine. They put in a railroad from Cordova, about 200 miles of railroad up to the mines. And we had an aerial tram with no machinery. All we had was a brake on it, because the loaded buckets going down the tram were loaded with ore, but the empty buckets were coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So the loaded buckets pull the empties up.
Oh, that's good thinking.
Yeah. And then they milled the ore and concentrated it, and they shipped the concentrate to Seattle for smelting. And they smelted it in Seattle.
When did you come back to the States?
1932.
When did you meet Mom?
Oh, well, let's see, where were we living when the folks were moving from Louisville to Denver to go back on the garden, and I went to Alaska. I come back in 32, and I drove cab, and I drove semi. I first went underground in a coal mine in Firestone when I was 6 years old. They took me down to let me see the mine. Mm-hmm. So I went down. We had a vertical shaft. One mine there, Frederick, ran on a slope. We went down on an angle, but ours was a vertical shaft. But anyway, they took me down to let me see a coal mine when I was only 6 years old. Mm-hmm. And then later on, I have worked in coal mines, and I've worked in hard rock tunnels, and I worked in a copper mine. Mm-hmm. When they started to shut the mine down, I gave up the office and went to work in the mine. I was loading ore with a shovel in the ore cars and pushing that car to the Grizzly. The Grizzly was just a bunch of iron bars spaced so far apart, and we had to break the ore up to small enough to go through those bars so the mill could handle it. Mm-hmm. And what we did, we had sledgehammers there to do that with too. And at this mine, at the different levels of the mine, we went down to 3,600 feet. And at one level, the temperature was just like a refrigerator, just over about 34 degrees. Mm-hmm. We could keep our meat and everything there, our vegetables and all that stuff. And we had cows down at the mill, and they lived in the barn all year round. They never come out of the barn in the wintertime. Mm-hmm. And so we had fresh milk for the babies. No women up on the mine zone, just men up there. Of course, they had a red light district 4 miles down the canyon from the mill. Yeah. There was 21 cabins down there with women in them. Oh, brother. That was a mess, too.
So, when did you get married?
Well, wait a minute. Then I went to Hawaii, and I worked underground there, too. Mm-hmm. We were putting down in underground fuel tanks to hold oil for the Navy. Now, these tanks, we had a cylinder that was 150 feet long and 100 feet across. We built this steel cylinder out of sheet steel, welded, as we were mining it down there. And that was pretty interesting the way that was done. We went up on Red Hill was an old volcano. We went up on top of the hill and we drove a 4 foot square shaft, 4 foot by 4 foot shaft, clear down to Pearl Harbor level. See? And then at Pearl Harbor, we drove a tunnel to meet every one of these shafts. There was 32 of these tanks to be built. So there was 32 of those shafts. And there was a belt run in that tunnel. And below each where we were mining the tanks out, and that belt carried the rubble that we mined out. It carried all that down, dumped it in the bay down there. And so after we finished one, had it all finished, we had this cylinder, and then we had like an empty globe, cut in two, and we used half of it for the top dome, and the other half of it for the bottom dome. Well, that was a 100-foot diameter globe. So we had 50 foot down below and 50 foot. Each one of these tanks is 250 feet high and 100 feet across. That held a hell of a lot of oil.
Yeah.
Well, when I left there, we had 20 of them done, and I had 12 more to go. So, I was there. Pearl Harbor Day too when the Japs hit.
Where were you?
I was up on Red Hill, and see, we heard these damn planes coming over, and we all run out of the tunnel to see the planes going over, and the Marines were there, and they were trying to run us back in the tunnel, afraid we were going to get bombed from there, and we stood right there and watched the damn bombs falling on the ships down below. When the Arizona went down, it had 1,500 men on it, and they just left them in there.
Yeah.
And then they built that thing above it. Well, anyway, I was over there, and I drew $156 a week and free board and room. Oh, and I had a 7-band shortwave radio, and I'd come in off of shift, and I didn't want to turn on the lights, so I had either 110 volt or battery power. And I'm sitting there tuning in to see what I can hear from the States on shortwave. And the damn machine gun comes through the screen of the window, and he said, "Hold it right there, hold it there." I was wondering what the hell was going on. They come in and they took my radio away from me. They thought I was sending signals they thought it was a transmitter. And I was signaling the Japs. I had a hell of a time getting that radio back, too.
It was just a receiver, though?
It was just a receiver. It was a 7-band receiver was all it was. Oh, and I went out and picked ripe pineapples. Where our bunkhouses were built, there was an old pineapple field and already been planted. And the pineapples were ripe. Boy, you never tasted anything like a vine-ripened pineapple.
I've had them before. They're good.
Boy. Well, anyway, I left Hawaii there in 1942. How long was I there? I met Mama in 1943 at Provo, Utah. Or I met her in 42, I guess. And we were married in a civil ceremony in June of 43. And when the Japs hit Pearl Harbor, I ran right down to Honolulu, and I wanted to join the Army and fight Japs. And they said, "No, you got a contract to finish here. You signed up for a contract on those tanks up there. You're going to finish that contract. You can't join the Army." So when I finished the contract and I went down, I said, "Okay, I finished the contract and I'll join now." "No, you can't join here. You have to go back to the States and join." So when I got to San Francisco, I hit the Army again, and they caught me. I was deaf in my left ear. They turned me down. So I thought, well, hell, maybe the Navy will take me. So I went to the Naval. I didn't even get by the desk. The guy said something, and I leaned over and I said, "Huh?" He said, "What the hell's the matter with your ear?" That's as far as I got there. So I got turned down twice. And I went to, while I was working in these tanks, because we were doing this welding on this sheet metal, I got an ironworkers union card. And I heard that they were putting up a steel mill in Provo, Utah. I went there and got a job climbing steel, erecting the mills there. And that's where they had the coke ovens and everything, on Lake Utah, where it was. That was pretty good too. And I met Mama, and Mama was working as a waitress, I guess you'd call it anyway. She was putting out the sandwiches and milk and stuff, and they'd always run out of milk. But she always held one milk back for me.
Yeah.
Everybody, nobody else could get milk, and when I come up, they want to know what the hell was going on. Those guys ahead of me were asking for milk, no milk. And then when I should step up, yeah, I got milk. But anyway, I met Mama and we got married on a civil ceremony in Salt Lake City. Okay. And I finished that job. I worked for two different people there. I worked for Chicago Bridge, the Coppers Company, and I got into it with the boss on that, and I quit them and went to work for, I worked for Chicago Bridge first. And I got into it with the boss, and I quit them, and I went over to the same job and worked for Coppers. And boy, the unions there. On top of these coke ovens, we had cast iron pipe with flanges on the end to be bolted together on the different lengths of pipe. And as a steel worker, we'd use our crane to lift this pipe up, and we put the two together, and we put one bolt in there to hold them together till the pipe fitters come up and put the rest of the gasket and the rest of the bolts there. Well, the pipe fitters went out on strike. They shut down the whole plant on account of that one bolt. We were supposed to have a pipe fitter up there to put that bolt down there. Yeah, the iron workers were not supposed to put that bolt in there.
That's crazy.
Oh boy.
When did you get in the Army then?
Okay, I finished that job, and Mom and I went to Los Angeles. No, we didn't. We went to Bellflower. Emma lived in Bellflower, California. And I got a job